Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to be reviewing thematic statement. We're going to take a look at what a thematic statement is and is not, and look at a few examples. So I think my face is actually covering it, but in an AP essay, a thematic statement is your thesis statement. So I'm going to use those terms interchangeably throughout the year. You should know that in every one of the AP essays, so whether it's the poetry response, the prose response, or the open-ended question, you do need to discuss theme. So the theme is going to be a part of your introductory paragraph or your thesis statement in some way. So a thematic statement is a thesis statement. Please remember that. So the first part of the thematic statement is going to stay within the novel. So you'll focus on something like a conflict in the novel, maybe growth of a character or a specific event. Maybe it's the author's use of symbolism, characterization, or another technique. And then what it reveals about the human condition. So we're always looking for that universal truth. What is the author showing us about life? So here is a list of some of the things that the thesis statement does in the AP essay, as it does in most other essays. Just know that the thematic statement does the same thing. So here is one example of an introductory paragraph for an AP essay. You will notice that the theme is stated in a couple of different places. It doesn't have to be a traditional thesis statement at the end of your introductory paragraph, and by no means should it be a three-part thesis statement where you list the three things that you're going to talk about in your essay. There is no set number of things that you should talk about. You should really focus on the most meaningful, whether that's 2 items or 1 or 4. That's going to depend on the AP prompt and the work that you're writing about. So your thematic statement is going to focus on something within the text and how it reveals a universal truth. So here, the universal truth is that a life of solitude need not always be lonely. And it talks about the author's purpose, which is to convince readers that their assumptions about homeless people are unfounded. So this kind of restates the theme in 2 different ways. Here is another example in which the theme is stated in 2 different places. We could say that the first highlighted sentence is more of a thematic statement because it talks about the biblical allusion. So the author's use of allusion helps to create the meaning, but it also talks about tone. So think a little bit more broadly when you are writing your introductory paragraph, when you're writing your thematic statements, because we want to break away from that formula. So when we were first taught to write an essay, we probably learned some kind of a formula for writing a thesis statement. And while that's okay to start with, it's not something that we want to lean on for the entire year. It's something we want to break away from. So you'll notice that here the writer talks about the author's use of different literary devices and also how those create the theme or sort of reveal the purpose. So this thesis statement is close to being there. It's not a perfect example. So let's take a look at it. In Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, the dark, mysterious landscape of the largely unexplored interior of the African jungle mirrors Marlowe's inner struggle to overcome his evil nature. So this is well written. This person clearly knows the novel. However, this thesis statement stays within the book. It talks about Marlowe, the character, and his inner conflict. It doesn't tell us anything about human nature. It doesn't reveal a universal truth. So while these things may be true, and this may be an accurate analysis of what Conrad, the author, is doing with the setting, with that landscape, and how it affects the character, it's not big enough, it's not broad enough or important enough for us to call it a thematic statement. So let's look at an example where this is done a little bit better. In Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, the dense, mysterious landscape of the largely unexplored interior of the African jungle represents the darkness in man's heart, a darkness that the protagonist, Marlowe, and all people struggle to overcome. So now you can see the writer has added detail to make this more universal. This applies to human beings and not just the character in the novel. So we want to make sure that our things that we notice about a work of literature, a play or a novel, that we can sort of go beyond the covers of the book and bring what we've learned into real life. So, what is that universal truth that applies to the human condition that tells us about what it's like to be a human being? And there are some rules, there are some parameters that we want to remember as well. So, we don't want to look for the moral of the story, which I know is something that when we're younger, we're taught that the theme is the moral of the story. But a theme doesn't always have to be such a definitive answer or a definitive statement about something. It can be a paradox. It can be a question. The author's purpose could simply be to raise a question. So we can't really state theme as such an absolute anymore. That something is good or something is bad or that people should do this or shouldn't. We don't want to use those terms in our thematic statement really ever with AP literature. We don't want a cliche, so love is blind or love heals all things. Those types of statements are cliche. We don't want to reuse someone else's idea. We really want to come up with something original, something from the heart, something that uses your voice that's not trite, that's not a cliche. Again, the thematic statement does not focus on the specific characters or the text. It focuses on human beings. It's general and it's about reality. Also, it needs to be reasonable. So we can't say that all friendships end in betrayal. We don't want to make absolute statements. We want to use terms like can or may or sometimes, just to sort of show that we've thought about the issue, that we've thought about the topic, and that we know that in life there are nuances, right? There are changes from person to person, and that the interpretation that you've provided is one valid interpretation, but it's not the only valid interpretation. So your thematic statement, your thesis, should be arguable. It should be something that we can debate about. It should be something that you can support with evidence from the text. And that is the most important thing for you to remember, that whatever you're trying to tell us is the author's purpose or the author's message, that we can go back in the text and look for events, look for character changes, look for quotes that really show that that could be true. Not that it is the only truth, but that what you are saying is a valid truth. So we start with a formula, and again, this is sort of just a safety net. This is the training wheels that we want to eventually take off the bicycle. But if you're sort of stuck and you're slowly starting with this, one way to do this is the thematic idea plus a statement about it plus a qualifier. So for example, courage, right? That's an idea, that's a topic. What about courage? Courage allows people to attempt difficult tasks in their lives. That is true. It's not true all the time, but we never said it always allows, right? Or that that's not an absolute. So we can use this statement even when there is a chance of failing. So we want to think a little bit more deeply, sort of dig for that meaning a little bit. So if you are scared of writing thematic statements, which is okay at this point, if you don't really know what you're doing and you want to stick with the formula for a while, then that is fine. I want to work with you on this. I want you to come to writing conferences. We can work together on breaking away from that formula, taking those training wheels off so that you can really express yourself, that your voice can shine through in your essays. Okay, so good luck. Here's my works cited, and let me know if you have any questions.